At around 11:45 p.m. on Friday, November 17, 1978, Brian Crane, a teenager, was driving to his home when he thought about stopping by his workplace, Burger Chef, located at Speedway, Indiana, which was set to close at 11 p.m. He wanted to check on his co-workers and see if they needed any assistance in closing the restaurant. However, upon entering the place, he was taken aback. There was no one in the restaurant, and none of the employees who were assigned for duty that day were inside. Among them were 20-year-old Jane Freet, the assistant manager, 16-year-old Daniel Davis, 17-year-olds Mark Flemens, and Ruth Shelton. The most disturbing thing was that the door was open, the lights were still on, and the cash register was lying on the floor. To make everything more unnerving, he saw the safe open and coins scattered on the floor.
What happened here on November 17, 1978 still haunts a man who was a boy back then, but was the first to walk into this former Burger Chef restaurant and figure out something was wrong. Brian Crane was an employee of the Burger Chef on Crawfordsville Road 43 years ago and told me what he saw when he walked in the back door that night.
You know, when I was walking around, I did walk in the manager's office, and I noticed that the safe is sitting wide open, cash drawers are laid out. And that's when I called somebody, and they told me to call the police.
Brian didn't know that what first appeared to be a simple disappearance, or perhaps an intentional sneak-off, would soon become a challenge for the whole county, especially for law enforcement. That was when another figure appeared outside Burger Chef, another employee named Paul. Brian told him about the situation unfolding inside, but Paul brushed it off and excused himself. As Paul left the restaurant, Brian thought about speaking with Jane. He dialed Jane's number to see if she could explain the situation. However, there was no answer from her side. He then called another Burger Chef's manager, where Jane used to work before she joined Speedway Burger Chef. The manager, however, denied having any contact with Jane. He noticed that Jane's white Vega was also nowhere to be found around the restaurant. Fearing the worst, Brian quickly called the general manager and reported the situation, who asked him to involve the police. That was when the situation took an unexpected turn. The evening of November 17, 1978, began like any other ordinary working day. The customers in Burger Chef were enjoying their meals, and the staff were present to cater to them. Burger Chef was a popular fast food restaurant located in the suburban town of Speedway. The restaurant staff was made up of young, hardworking employees who were also known for the close friendship they shared with one another. But on that particular day, the energy inside the restaurant felt off, and tension was evident in the air. Jane, the assistant manager, had begun her fast food career when she was just 17, a student at Avon High School. She started working for Burger Chef at the 38th Street and Lafayette Road location, later transferring to the Speedway store as an assistant manager in the spring of 1978. Just a few days ago, Jane had reportedly fired an employee, the same employee, Paul, who had shown up at Burger Chef. According to some reports, Paul didn't know that he was fired, as he was supposed to meet Jane at Burger Chef the same day the staff disappeared, a connection that would raise slight suspicions later in the case. And just like Jane, Ruth was another passionate young lady with her own dreams. She was a junior at Northwest High School. Apart from cleaning and working devotedly at the Burger Chef, Ruth was passionate about STEM, something that other girls often shy away from. She would take STEM-related classes, surpassing the typical teenager's expectations. Mark, on the other hand, had grown up in a Jehovah's Witness household. He faced a number of challenges during high school, but eventually adjusted and found success as a sophomore. Mark had prior run-ins with law enforcement and was reportedly on probation. He had only been released 3 days before his abduction. While he was at his job, it was actually another employee named Ginger's shift, and Mark had agreed to trade shifts with her. Daniel was also a junior at Decatur Central High School, holding a joyful and fun nature. Daniel was relatively new at Burger Chef and was hired right after another employee had left their position. Daniel wasn't supposed to be at Burger Chef at the time of the abduction, as his shift ended at around 9:45 p.m. He had called his parents and asked them about doing extra hours as Christmas was nearing. With the evening turning into a dark night, a strange silence spread all over the restaurant. It was 11 p.m., and the door to Burger Chef was closed for customers. Jane, Mark, Ruth, and Daniel prepared to clean up the restaurant, not knowing something terrible was about to happen to all of them. As Daniel took out the trash from the back door, the tragedy was waiting to unfold. Within a matter of minutes, all four of them vanished into thin air. No message, no sign, just an eerie silence and traces of their presence left behind. The arrival of the police at Burger Chef brought nothing but disappointment. The officers entered the restaurant with suspicious eyes, not for someone else but the missing employees themselves. When they attempted to look around for evidence and any clues that could help them determine the reality behind their disappearance, they found nothing of use. They noticed that there were no signs of struggle, and a few $100s were missing from the safe. However, the purses and the jackets belonging to female employees were still at the restaurant, raising slight but no major suspicions. Taking everything into consideration, they soon ruled the incident as a sneak-off by the teenagers, assuming that the employees purposely stole money to have a fun night. The situation was dissolved quickly by the police, but something that left many, even the detectives, shocked was the police's impractical take on the situation. It was when police failed to capture any photos of the affected area in the restaurant, which was something crucial, even if it was a deliberate disappearance by the teenagers. The situation grew even more complicated when the morning shift employees arrived, and the police instructed them to clean up the place as usual, assuring them there was nothing to worry about. It initially did look like it was no big deal whatsoever. However, there was a series of chaos already waiting to unfold soon. The police's failure to consider everything related to the case seriously would eventually make this whole ordeal a bigger, unbeatable challenge. Little by little, the tension in the air began to get thicker with the series of shocking revelations. The very next morning, Saturday, November 18th, 1978, Jane's partially locked white Chevrolet Vega was found abandoned near a park, sparking a suspicion. What followed was even worse. None of the four missing employees had returned to their homes or showed up at the workplace, further escalating the whole situation. Their parents and friends had not been able to get in contact with them. This revelation was enough for the police to quickly turn the presumed theft by the employees into a serious abduction case. The non-professional conduct by police officers, which began with the Burger Chef, refused to die out. Police, once again, failed to treat the car as a crime scene, and no forensic evidence was collected from it. However, the police heard the accounts of different witnesses who lived nearby, hoping it would somehow help them build a timeline. One of the witnesses heard a loud burst between 11:30 and 12:30 a.m., but quickly brushed it off. Another witness, who was in the neighborhood, saw Jane's Vega parked outside between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m., assuming it belonged to one of the other neighbors.
At 12:15, another witness came to the back of the store and noticed that the door was ajar, and went inside, and no one was there. So we know that sometime between 11:21 and 12:15, these four victims were abducted from the Burger Chef.
The investigation quickly turned the case from a missing persons inquiry to a quadruple investigation. The public and authorities were all shocked to their core by this chilling development in the case. It had become clear that the employees were first abducted by the culprits, who weren't only after money, but they were also ruthless and cold-blooded. But the question about the left-out cash and employees' purses was still a mystery. To add to the suspicion, the remains of some employees still had some cash in their pockets, with jewelry and watches on them. Because of the latter part, the police found it difficult to conclude the case based on the theory of robbery. If the abductors were after the cash, why would they leave behind the remaining cash sources? As expected, the police had no clue about the unfolding situation and the eyebrow-raising questions. Time after time, they handled the crime scene poorly. They lacked any professional ethics and the understanding of how to manage a crime scene cautiously. Reportedly, many police officers drove their patrol cars across places that were supposed to be cordoned off for everyone. To make it all worse, one of the officers had even disturbed and moved an employee's remains without the presence of the forensic team. As if things weren't bad enough, another investigative officer allegedly took Mark's watch from the crime scene to his home without realizing its importance. Despite such mishandlings, the investigation quickly grew in scale, with manpower from multiple agencies, including the Indiana State Police, the Marion County Sheriff's Department, the Indianapolis Police, and Speedway Police, alongside the FBI, joining forces to push the boundaries in cracking the case.
When this case happened, it initially began on November 17th in Speedway, Indiana, and it was originally a missing persons case, and it was and the lead agency at that time was Speedway Police Department, and then when it became a investigation. Is when the Indiana State Police became involved. But when it was a missing persons, it was multiple agencies: Speedway Police Department, IPD, Marion County Sheriff's Department. We're all involved. Federal agencies were all involved in trying to find these missing persons.
With no major leads or clues, the police were just as baffled as the public. No one could understand the real motive of the crime. With no answers in their grasp, they turned to interviewing everyone related, including the parents of the missing employees and the eyewitnesses. The first eyewitness was India Flemens' friend. India was Mark's sister, who was with Mark that day at Burger Chef. Helping him out, India later left with her friend, who noticed two white males dressed in police-like attire entering the Burger Chef between 9 and 9:30 p.m. Several other witnesses had come forward to give their account of what they saw. Among them was a woman who went to Dunkin' Donuts to pick up her daughter and friend after a roller skating party around the same time on November 17. The woman noticed a 4-door station wagon arrive in the parking lot of Burger Chef. The latter account was similar to other witnesses' accounts, discovering two white males in the restaurant. The next witness was a major lead, who also reportedly had an interaction with the suspects. It was a young guy whose girlfriend used to work at a business near Dunkin' Donuts. When she finished her duty, she and her boyfriend sat in the parking lot smoking. However, as they sat down, two white males of a sketchy appearance approached them out of nowhere. Both were in their 30s. One of the men had a beard, while the other one was clean-shaven and blonde. They asked them to leave immediately, making an excuse for vandalism in that area. The guy noticed that the bearded guy was hiding his mouth with a handkerchief while speaking to them. Their appearance seemed to match the description given by other witnesses. The police officers took the descriptions into their account and got composite sketches drawn of these two men for the public. But they also did something out of the box. They paid forensic artists to create clay busts of the suspects.
On November 17, 1978, the Burger Chef was scheduled to close. We know that at 11:21 there was a witness that was behind the Burger Chef who identified the clean-shaven man and the bearded man, which are the pictures that are behind us, and those were the clay busts were created. It was based off of those descriptions.
The gravity of the case caused large-scale fear among the community of Indianapolis. One of the residents spoke to the press after the horrific discovery. "I wouldn't be surprised if people start moving out of Speedway if people don't stop getting here. People just don't want to come into this area." At the time, the police were also unable to solve prior cases earlier that year, which made some locals feel doubtful about their abilities. They didn't solve the one or the they won't solve this one either. With pressure building and the time running out, the police desperately looked for answers and requested that the public come forward with any tips about the suspects. The Speedway investigators also reportedly met Oklahoma detectives to check if there was any connection with the unsolved 6 homicides in an Oklahoma steak restaurant. However, they found nothing beneficial, and the meeting appeared to be of no use. During the investigation, it was also discovered that Jane received threatening and obscene calls from unknown individuals a few days before her abduction. While the reason behind the calls and the person responsible were unknown, the police suspected that Paul might have been involved in the whole situation, especially when he ignored the missing employees and left Brian alone that day. Yet, investigators still never brought Paul in or pressed any charges against him. In order to compel the witnesses to come forward, the Burger Chef Company announced a $25,000 reward for anyone helping the authorities trace the suspect. An anonymous person also donated an additional $10,000 to the reward. Steak and Shake added multiple $1,000s to the donation. Even after that, no credible witnesses or tips came in that could help the investigators in any way. However, the composite sketches and clay busts of the suspects did help them a bit. Someone called the police at a Greenwood bar after the caller saw a man who looked like one of the suspects. The man was reportedly bragging about the homicide. Detective Virgil Vandegrift went to the bar in casual clothes to observe the man. The claims made by the caller appeared true, as this suspicious man was seen loudly bragging about looting and causing the deaths of the Burger Chef workers. Shockingly, he even acted out as if showing how he had pulled off the horrific crime. It didn't take long for the police to apprehend the suspicious man and bring him in for interrogation. When he was asked about the homicide, he quickly denied all the allegations and pretended not to know about the homicide. The investigators turned to a polygraph test, which the man passed effortlessly. At the time, polygraph tests were considered credible and powerful enough to draw a conclusion. Therefore, the police released the man after a short while. Before leaving the police station, the man gave the police a tip, perhaps useful. It was a list of names of people involved in the Burger Chef robbery. With the help of that tip, police tracked the bearded suspect in the town of Franklin. The man had some similarity with the composite sketch, but strangely had no alibi. His neighbor, however, had a likeness to the clean-shaven suspect's sketch. When the police asked the bearded man to come in for a lineup, he came in with his beard shaved. It overall made him more suspicious in the eyes of the investigators. Even after a tense interrogation, both of the suspects refused to talk. The police offered both of them plea deals, but it didn't prove fruitful either. With no major evidence against them, the police finally let those individuals go, with investigators continuing to dig deeper. They came across another revelation. Jane's brother James was possibly involved in the case. James had previously been arrested on cocaine charges, which meant he was into drugs. The police suspected that James might have something to do with the abduction after a deal went wrong. But again, James wasn't brought in for questioning. Several years passed, and the police failed to catch the suspects, until one day something changed, and their suspicions about James proved right. It was nearly 6 years later that the police got another solid lead and a potential prime suspect. Speedway investigators received a call from Pendleton Correctional Facility. A criminal named Donald Wayne Forrester, a 34-year-old, was about to start his 95-year prison sentence on some serious charges. He told the investigators that he had a confession to make about Burger Chef homicide. What he told the investigators completely shifted the whole narrative. Around the time of the Burger Chef homicide, Donald used to live in Speedway, and he grew up around the area where people and police were exposed to a grim discovery. The information and claims were strong enough for the investigators to interrogate Donald. Once in the police station, Donald claimed that he was the one who took away the lives of Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton using a firearm. When the detectives took Donald to the place of discovery, he was able to spot the exact location where each employee was found. And just like that, several years passed, and Donald continued to add to his chilling confessions. Between the years 1984 and 1986, Donald told the investigators that after the homicide, he and his ex-wife returned to the field and picked up the shell casings to remove any forensic evidence. He later brought them home and flushed them down his toilet. For verification, the investigators inspected the septic tank at his old home. This confirmed their worst fears. They found several shell casings there. Donald's ex-wife added another layer of certainty when she told the same story to the investigators. According to Donald Wayne Forrester, this is exactly what happened on the fateful night of November 17, 1978. Jane's brother James was into drugs and was at odds with some dealers. That night, the dealers, including Donald himself, went to the burger chef, intending to threaten Jane as a way to pressure James into settling his debts. But things went out of control when 16-year-old Mark Flemens jumped in to rescue Jane from the drug dealers.
So, Kevin, do you think drugs may have played a major role here?
Drugs certainly seems to be an undercurrent that runs underneath this case. There was certainly reports of drugs being sold by employees at the restaurant. There's actually an indication in this document that an employee had recently been fired from the Burger Chef restaurant for his involvement in dealing, and that raises a lot of questions.
Mark's rage brought about a serious altercation between him and the group. During the fight, Mark fell down and hit his head. That blow knocked him out, and the gang members thought Mark had died. They had to do something to cover up the homicide and the evidence. In that moment of fear, they put all of the employees in Jane's car and drove to the middle of the town, exactly where Jane's car was found. From there, they transferred all of them into the getaway car and drove them to the secluded woods. One by one, they ruthlessly snatched each one of their lives. His narrative had already convinced the investigators. Donald had also offered to give them 3 other suspects' details. The closure and suspect were finally within their reach, at least that's what they expected. However, their hopes turned dull when the police's incompetence came into play once again. Someone from their department leaked Donald's confession to the media in November 1986. This compelled Donald to back off and withdraw from his statements. Without the help of Donald, investigators couldn't find any more physical evidence that could easily build a case against him and others involved. This was the closest the investigators could get to a suspect and crack the case open, but it all went down in vain. The case was shut once again. Donald didn't make any more confessions. In fact, he took all those secrets with him forever after he died in 2006 due to cancer. Other than drug involvement and personal grudges, there was another theory that surfaced at the time. Many believed the perpetrator wasn't a single individual with one motive, but a group of different people who had their own motives, especially given the different ways the employees lost their lives. To this day, the police continue to delve into this case's details, and authorities frequently assign a new investigator to work on the case, hoping that someone will be able to figure everything out. But until now, no one has produced new evidence, nor has anyone come forward with tips or secrets about the homicide. The most painful part is the lack of closure for the grieving families, who have been hoping to know and understand why their loved ones experienced a bitter end.
I've always had some hope, but I guess there's a difference between hoping and believing. So I know that there's always that chance that this could actually be solved, but I'm not going to hold my breath for it.
As police remain involved in the case investigation, many are hopeful that they will work it out, but others think the case might remain unsolved due to the absence of major evidence from the crime scene. With many theories making rounds, the police have only focused and are still focusing on personal grudges and robbery gone wrong scenarios. To this day, no solid evidence has been collected against anyone, including Paul and James, further restricting the police from filing any charges against them. Do you think the police would have been able to crack this case if they had considered the disappearance of the employees seriously from the start and preserved the crime scene? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more historical true crime documentaries.